blah, 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 blah. Try again. Yes, if I.
Hello, Professor. I can't hear you.
Are you here?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. I was just testing out.
Am I too early?
What? Yeah, I didn't check our Discord. Did you send me a message?
Oh yeah, I was just telling you that Denham won't be able to make it. He's on the flight.
Oh, okay, he's on the flight. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, so the talk will be recorded. So is that okay for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, Tyler.
Hello.
Hi. Can you hear me, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can you hear
long
me?
time no see. I cannot hear you, Tyler. I cannot hear you. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Now I can hear you. I just testing the
Oh,
audio.
okay.
So I will let Lloyd go first. So after he will give a presentation and followed by question and answers. Then you will give the talk after his Q&A finishes. Is that okay, Taylor?
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, perfect.
So Lloyd, do you have slides to share?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, let me, where's the setting thing? So Lloyd, you can go ahead and share your slides.
One second.
I think Loai needs to be let back in.
Yeah, he dropped or something.
Yeah, I think he disconnected.
So, Lloyd, are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm
Okay.
sharing right now.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead and share your slides.
Should I start or?
Yeah, so let me introduce our guest speaker here today. So as an announcement, we have one guest speaker, but actually we are gonna have two guest speakers for today. So the first guest speaker is Loai AlFarran. So he's the treasurer of the blockchain at CSUF. And also he's the blockchain engineer working for Float Capital. So let's welcome Lloyd. Lloyd is all yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'll start by introducing myself and how I started my Web3 journey. My name is Loai AlFarran, and I graduated from Cal State Fullerton last summer with a computer science degree. I've been reading about blockchain since 2018, but I never invested my time like on the technical side, but rather on the trading side. Last year, Professor Ham posted the idea of starting a blockchain club at Fullerton, which kickstarted my journey basically. I started on the club with some of the group members on hackathons, and I started like getting more involved with smart contracts and stuff. So I started my internship at Flow Capital about 3 months ago. And the interesting part about it is that I got the internship through Twitter. So let me introduce you to Float Capital. Float Capital is a peer-to-peer yield enhanced floating asset exposure mechanism. So Float is the easiest and safest way for users to buy magic internet assets. So they don't have to worry about over collateralization or suddenly getting liquidated. And it's completely governed by code, allowing anyone around the world to get involved with it. So the way it works is you basically take long or short positions, but it's peer-to-peer, and the ratio of long and short is dynamic based on how much each side has liquidity, which prevents liquidations. And by integrating Chainlink Oracle prices, you prevent front running, and the platform doesn't have any trading fees. So Chainlink is a protocol that provides developers or apps like accurate prices and on-chain, which are compared to the off-chain prices, such as the trading apps. So the way how it works is when a Float user, for example, you open the website and you're creating a request to long or short the market based on what asset you want, the request is sent and it's added to a batch. It doesn't execute immediately. And that's a way to prevent front running, because on-chain prices are always late than off-chain prices. So to avoid arbitrage opportunities and bots like exploiting this, the price only executes after the next price updates. So Chainlink pushes the price to the chain, waits for the next price, then your mint request gets executed. I'm going to show you a walkthrough on how to use the Float Capital. So this is on testnet on Polygon Mumbai. For example, if you think Ethereum is going down, you just simply come and short the market, for example, for 3,000 DAI. DAI is pegged to dollar, which means this is basically $3,000, but these are test tokens. So all you have to do is, 1 second, is mint. And now the transaction is going through. It takes a while, like but less than a minute. So you can see here that now the mint request got sent, and you have to wait about 50 seconds for the next price update. And that is what I meant by preventing front running. So when this counter goes down to 0, the transaction will execute and your short position will be executed. And the way the exposure is calculated on here is based on how much liquidity each side has. So for now, the long liquidity is more than the short liquidity. That's why the exposure is less than the short. So there's several strategies where this will benefit you, since you can 2x short or long a market. And that's by getting a delta neutral position where you just don't care about the price movements, but rather capture the interest or APR on an asset. So for example, there's OM, which is Olympus DAO. I'll show you an example right now. So Olympus DAO is a coin you can buy where you can stake it and receive about 50% APY. But since there's a high percentage of APY, the asset is pretty volatile for price actions. So the strategy is to buy Olympus, stake it, receive the 950% APY, and then come to float and short it for the same amount. And that way you don't care about price action, but rather just capture the 950% APY. And whatever happens to the price, you're protected at all time. So I'll show you a road to Web3 and how to land a job as a blockchain developer. So my advice is to go into hackathons and boot camps. There's several online. I'll provide resources at the end of this slideshow, online tutorials. Twitter is where I learned most of what I've learned. Just open a Twitter account, follow like Web3 developers. They post a lot of resources all the time, and just start applying for jobs. These are my top 5 learning resources. Crypto Zombies is a Solidity tutorial that teaches you how to build a simple game on the chain. Another thing is Build Space. It's a network of Web3 builders where it has a lot of resources to teach you. Web3 University has some boot camps and hackathons. There's actually, I think, one starting soon. Encode Club, these sponsor boot camps where if you get accepted, the boot camps are basically free. And as soon as you finish the boot camp, they are actually help you to get hired into a job. And the last one is patika.dev. And all the resources I gave you are for free. There's a lot of other resources which are paid, but these are free and provide the same knowledge as the other ones. And if you're actually excited to start something, there's a Web3 and Near bootcamp starting where you can apply, like applications are due next week. You can still apply and start this bootcamp. I would recommend that. That's it for my presentation. If you guys have any questions,
Thank you, Lloyd. So let's see, any questions for first speaker? So any question, you can unmute and just ask, or you can also put it on the chat. So any question from the classroom here? No questions?
I have a question, Professor Ram. This is Neeraj Gupta. Nice meeting you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm from CPI C545. I wanted to know that do you use any decentralized storage like IPFS directly to store any assets, or do you have any use cases for NFTs, etc.? What's your take on it, and how to go about learning those areas?
yes, there's actually NFTs on Float Capital. So every day you interact with the project, you get 250 gems. And the more streak you have, the more you can mint one of these for free. So I'm not sure if they're using IPFS for their NFTs, but that's what we have on NFTs over here. There's also another thing, how we're integrating NFTs on Float. For example, I'm not sure if you've heard of RumbleKongs, but if you own a RumbleKong, you basically never have to pay fees on Float Capital.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
So we have a question from the chat. So if Lloyd, you cannot see the question, I will repeat the question. The question is, what are the skills required to be a Web3 developer? Also, can you share your interview process?
Skills about in Web3 mostly is almost like full stack. You would need front-end development, back-end, and then smart contract development. I would say you can start with, the first thing to start with is front-end, and then go on with smart contracts and back-end. About the interview process, since it was basically a Twitter application where the co-founder just tweeted and I just replied to his tweet, it was pretty simple. We just spoke in general and then started my internship. But most internships start with technical assessments. You can go to Code in Game. They have pretty much a lot of resources for you to learn and questions. I can send the link on the chat. Any other questions?
So I actually have a follow-up question, Lloyd.
Yeah.
So what questions they ask? Also, what questions the founder asked you during your interview process?
I wouldn't say it's a good way to compare my interview because it was really simple. They're an alpha project, they're so early too, so they didn't have like specific way they would interview people. I think I'm the first one they ever hired to their team, but their team is basically people they know each other, and I think they graduated together. They're from South Africa. Usually the questions will be what other projects, GitHub. I think you need to have a GitHub with a lot of commits and projects. That's the first thing they look at.
So let's look at your GitHub profile to see if
Yes.
you should get it in the project.
Yes, I think the most they care on the Web3 space is GitHub, and if you've been active in GitHub and what projects you worked on.
So any other questions? Okay, from the chat, no question from here. In the classroom, any questions? No? Okay, so then let's give another round of applause to Lloyd. Thank you for your wonderful talk as the first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So next, Tyler. Tyler, are you here, Tyler?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second guest speaker is Tyler Goodman. So Tyler Goodman is the founder of Blockchain Club, and he's also a blockchain engineer working for Cosmos. So then the topic here is the third generation blockchains, talking about Cosmos. So let's welcome Tyler. Tyler, is all yours.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so I'll be talking about what we're kind of calling third generation blockchains and what we're doing at Cosmos and kind of how we got here. Yeah, about me, I'm a software engineer at Regen Network. We're building a Cosmos blockchain for climate change and carbon credit trading and stuff. We're also the core maintainers of the Cosmos SDK. So a lot of our work revolves around maintaining it and helping other people build their own blockchains with the SDK. I also got my bachelor's in computer science here, and I graduated in December. And then here's some socials if you want to connect and chat afterwards or something. So I'll be starting off the talk with the first generation of blockchains, which is just like simple transaction chains, which is basically like, you know, your Bitcoin, your Litecoin, stuff like that. And I'm sure most of you already know, like Bitcoin kind of combined a lot of cool things that allowed us to trade tokens with each other. Like it's a completely peer-to-peer network. It has consensus to keep the state in check between all the peers, and it's secure. Like if you own your coins, as long as you don't leak your seed phrase or whatever, like they'll always be your coins. And the network is also resistant to malicious actors, as long as it's less than, I think, like 51% of the network. But Bitcoin, it only really solved one problem. It just gave us a decentralized currency, and it was kind of slow. So once Vitalik came around with Ethereum, he said, you know, like we could probably do more with this. We could like slap a virtual machine inside Bitcoin and give us smart contracts. And that pretty much turned a little like payment network into a fully composable like world computer. And people started building apps on this giant computer, and we got DeFi, DAOs, NFTs. But there's one in particular that's kind of interesting, is this Cryptokitties, which, if you don't know, I think it launched in 2017, and it's basically just an NFT game where you like breed cats and trade cats, one of the first NFT platforms. And it quickly filled the entire Ethereum network with cats. All the blocks were just filled with Cryptokitties transactions. The network slowed to a halt, and no one could really do anything because there were so many cats. And then Infura reported that their requests doubled overnight pretty much just because of these cats. And this isn't the only application where this happens. Stark Forest is a ZK Snark game on Ethereum. And they saw that on their testnet, their gas prices rose even higher than actual mainnet Ethereum. And you can see with this gas consumption screenshot. There's a lot of apps that just kind of overtake the entire network. And basically, OpenSea is like the reason why a lot of us pay a lot of high fees on Ethereum, which is not very fun. And that's kind of because of the way Ethereum is set up. If you think about the entire network is just like one computer, you're basically running all these different apps on this computer. And it can make it really, really slow sometimes. Like if a bunch of people started trading NFTs, all of a sudden your experience using Dark Forest or Uniswap is tarnished because you're paying high fees and it becomes really slow. And that's kind of the equivalent of like running all these top applications like Google, Wikipedia, YouTube on a single like AWS EC2 instance or like a DigitalOcean droplet. So if you can imagine your experience of like loading a YouTube video could be affected by somebody loading a bunch of Wikipedia articles. It's probably not the best thing to do there. And so the dilemma that these types of blockchains end up with is like balancing between making things faster and making things more decentralized. So you could just like scale vertically and make the node requirements higher by making like block transaction times faster and like the block size bigger. But that kind of like kills your decentralization because then people need better computers and not everyone has access to better computers and it just kind of centralizes. So that's where the third generation comes in, which is what we're calling app chains. And the idea is to not do this vertical scaling thing where we have to worry about, you know, the how powerful your node is. And why don't we just make more nodes or like more networks? So that's where Cosmos comes in. And Cosmos is built up of 3 core pieces, which is the SDK, which is just a framework to help you build a blockchain, and the Tendermint core, which is a consensus engine, and then the IBC protocol, which brings us composability. So I'll start by kind of explaining what Tendermint is and why we need this. So Tendermint just handles all the consensus. It's a practically Byzantine fault tolerant consensus engine, meaning as long as 2/3 of the network stays true, nothing can really bad happen. We also have absolute finality, which is really important for IBC, which I'll explain in a bit. We have 6-second block times, and we get about 4,000 transactions per second with a little over 100 validators. So I'll talk about kind of what makes Tendermint different than normal consensus, like proof of work. So basically there's a block proposer that proposes a block to the network in different rounds. And if everyone agrees, that block gets added to the network. And that kind of is contrasted to proof of work chains where consensus kind of matters with who can mine the fastest. And it's kind of like a race to see who can, you know, mine as far as they can in the future to get the block rewards. And that kind of gives us this difference of absolute finality versus probabilistic finality. In Tendermint and other proof of stake consensus protocols, absolute finality is when like a block gets added to a network, there's no way that that block can ever like disappear from the network. It's just once it's in the network, it's there, it's permanent. Whereas in probabilistic finality, like Bitcoin and Ethereum, all that matters is the tallest chain. So you could have a blockchain and a block in there could be settled in like 1 block deep. But if someone else is mining like 5 minutes into the future and they have a bunch more blocks, that blockchain is actually the truer one. It's the highest chain. So you could have some of your transactions kicked out because of that. So Tendermint is cool and all, but you also need something to build your application or your state machine on top of, which is where the Cosmos SDK comes in. And this kind of gives us a framework to build an application-specific blockchain, as well as kind of boilerplate stuff that not everyone needs to implement over and over again, like staking logic and slashing logic. We also have like a bank module that handles tokens and coins. And so if we go back to our Ethereum architecture here, you can see that this is kind of how it looks in a Cosmos standpoint. So all these nodes, instead, you imagine as their own blockchains. So like OpenSea could have their own blockchain and just handle all their NFTs. Uniswap can have their own blockchain and just handle swaps. That way, the other transaction types aren't affecting your throughput of your application. But there's one benefit to having everything on one node or one chain, and that's because they all share the same state. So you can kind of get this like composability layer where, you know, different applications can ask Uniswap, you know, what's the price of USDC right now? And it can respond with that because it's all in the same database. And that's where this idea of like DeFi Legos comes in. Like you can just start building apps on top of each other and composing stuff. And that doesn't really work with just Cosmos and Tendermint alone, which is why we need IBC. And IBC is a protocol that connects blockchains, and it allows you to send tokens across the network. And eventually it will allow you to execute smart contracts on a different blockchain from like a source blockchain. So you could have an account on the Cosmos hub, and you could send an IBC transaction to the Agoric blockchain to execute some sort of transaction. And that gives us a composability layer similar to Ethereum's shared state layer. So the way IBC works is basically through Merkle proofs. Blockchain A will lock up some tokens, send it over to blockchain B. They'll get the proof, and then they'll mint basically voucher tokens, which allow you to kind of use pseudo native tokens on blockchain B. And then you can go back and forth. You can hop to all different blockchains, and eventually you can come back to A and get your native tokens back if you want. So yeah, Tendermint makes this all possible, as I described before, with the absolute finality. Whereas like once a block is in the chain, it's final, and you know, miners aren't racing into the future and kicking out your block because some guy has a mining farm that's like mining 10 years into the future. So Cosmos SDK makes it really, really easy to build a blockchain. You know, as I said before, we have all these modules, and yeah, this kind of showcases like what people are doing with this SDK. These are all the chains that are live and connected today, and they all kind of solve different use cases. So some of my favorites here are like Secret Network, which is a privacy preserving smart contract chain, which uses secure enclaves on Intel processors to kind of obscure data and stuff. We also have Osmosis, which is basically a Uniswap chain with some other cool features. There's Sentinel, which is a VPN service that's just all decentralized nodes. So you don't send your request to like ExpressVPN, you just send it to some node on the Sentinel network and they provide your VPN for you. And then we have a cache, which is like AWS, but decentralized, and then Regen Network, our own platform for carbon credits. So there are some issues to kind of consider with Cosmos, and one of the biggest ones is like decentralization. 150 validators is kind of where everybody's at in the Cosmos right now, and that's because once you get past 200, performance starts to really degrade, and that's because of the way Tendermint works. You know, there's different rounds of voting, and there's like pre-commits, and with all those rounds of voting, it kind of becomes exponential when you add more validators. So after 200, performance starts to drop really rapidly. There's also the problem of like setting up your own blockchain. It's not as easy as Ethereum, where you just like write a smart contract and push it to the chain. If you want to write an app on Cosmos, you do have to find your own validator set currently, which kind of makes it hard for everybody to build what they want. But eventually Cosmos will get shared security, which means you can launch your own blockchain and have the Cosmos hub validate your chain for you, so you don't have to find your own validators. There's a few other similar architectures to Cosmos. One of the biggest ones is Polka Dot, which is a little different. Instead of having all these like horizontally scaled blockchains, you just have this main hub chain that provides consensus to a bunch of sub parachains. One of the drawbacks of this is that there's only 100 parachain slots, so you can't have like an infinite amount of blockchains like you could in Cosmos. So that's one pitfall there. And then there's also Avalanche subnets. I'm not too sure how these work yet. I haven't looked into it much, but I do know, I think it's similar to Cosmos. So I'll finish up here with talking about Regen Network. If you've heard of KlimaDAO or Toucan on Ethereum, it's kind of similar to that, except we kind of rolled our own in-house solutions to a lot of things. We have a whole science team that's developing our own carbon sequestration methodology that people can follow, and they can practice this methodology on their land, and then they can mint carbon credits by providing data about their soil levels and soil health. And we already have a few landowners working with us. We have a bunch in Australia, one here in the States in Kansas, and then one in Kenya, who are actively using our carbon credit methodology, and they'll be providing credits on the chain once they have the data for that. Yeah, so also we are hiring. If you want to check us out at this, our Workable link here, there's a few different roles, some non-technical, a lot of mostly technical roles though. So if you want to apply, feel free, or if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me at my work email here. And then also we have a blockchain club, I guess as most of you probably know, so you can scan this QR code to join it, and it will bring you to our Discord, where most of us are hanging out and discussing stuff going on in the blockchain world. So yeah, that's pretty much my presentation. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Awesome presentations. Just in case Tyler can see it. So let me see. Any question here? Any question here?
Hey, Tyler. Hey, this is I have a question. Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. So Tyler, I wanted to know, like, do you use any blockchain to log the credits? Because the idea is good that we can actually trade in the credits, especially the carbon credits. Like especially on the Regen Network side, are you guys using Ethereum or any other blockchains to document that these credits are now documented as a part of Ledger, and anybody can go and see what's your approach behind that?
Yeah, so we have our own blockchain network, which is part of the Cosmos ecosystem, and we have, we basically built a model for carbon credits as a cryptocurrency, which is kind of like a hybrid between NFTs and your regular ERC20 tokens like USDC or DAI, except that different batches of carbon credits, like carbon credits from Wilmot Farm in Australia and carbon credits from some farm in Kansas, they're not entirely equal, but carbon credits from those farms alone are equal within their own set. So we've modeled credits like that on our own chain. We're also building a marketplace to trade those credits on our chain, and you'll be able to use all sorts of different cryptocurrencies to purchase those credits because of IBC allowing you to transfer cryptocurrencies from other Cosmos chains and stuff like that.
Yeah, I see.
So yeah.
That was my next question. Like, do you have like Explorer where somebody wants to see, hey, I really want to make sure that these credits exist. So do you have any Explorer in your marketplace? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, there are explorers for the entire Cosmos ecosystem. I think one of them is called Mint Scan. You can select which blockchain you want to look at, and it will give you all the block information. But that only goes so far as to show transactions, how much your account holds and stuff like that. So at Regen, we have a front-end team that's building kind of our carbon credit registry, and they are building profiles and stuff to display carbon credits and a whole bunch of other features that I'm sure are cool, but I don't know much about because I'm on the blockchain team, not their team.
Yeah, and the last question I have is, what kind of consensus mechanism do you use as a part of Cosmos? Like, is it proof of work or proof of stake, or you talked about Tendermint? Can you talk a little bit more about the consensus framework?
Yeah, so yeah, all the Cosmos chains use Tendermint, and Tendermint is a proof of stake consensus engine. each chain can kind of like tweak the parameters, like how much inflation happens, and they can control granular stuff like that. But yeah, the base consensus is just public proof of stake with Tendermint.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler.
Mhm.
Nice meeting
Yeah.
you.
You too.
So let me see if we have a question from the chat. According to you, in future, is Web3 is really going to replace Web2 apps like YouTube, Twitter, etc., or it is applications will be limited to NFTs and cryptocurrencies. Also, as cryptocurrencies are constantly scaling up from Ethereum to Polygon, are these good investment?
Cool. So I'll start with the first part there. Future of Web3 replacing Web2 apps. I don't think that Web3 will fully replace Web2, mostly because of all the like, decentralized Twitter, decentralized YouTube and stuff like that I've seen. It's kind of hard to scale in a way, and it's never will be like truly decentralized as a lot of people want. And nobody really wants to pay to tweet anything. I think most people are okay with their data being harvested and being shown ads so they can tweet for free. Where I do see Web3 being really powerful is kind of turning like classically centralized physical architecture into like a co-op owned system. One of the like best examples I've seen of that is this chain called Helium, which is kind of like decentralized IoT network communication. So instead of like, every city paying Verizon or AT&T to get IoT connectivity, they can just participate in this Helium network. And Helium is just like made up of a bunch of people who have Helium miners that basically relay IoT, chirps or data streams to where they need to go. So, it's a lot cheaper for people running IoT devices to link up into Helium. And then it also provides payment to people who provide those services. So like, it's kind of like a win-win-win situation for everybody. Another one is Althea, which is kind of like a co-op for bandwidth. They rolled out a lot of that in rural Oregon already. Basically, like someone who does have a good connection can throw up an Althea satellite, and it will provide internet to other people who have like other types of devices to capture that signal from the satellite. And basically it's renting out their bandwidth to these other people who don't normally get bandwidth. So, someone's getting paid for, renting out their bandwidth to these people, and people who don't have bandwidth are now getting bandwidth. So it's like a huge win for everybody. I think that's kind of where Web3 fits in most, is where we can capture like the most wins in like a community way. Let's see our last part here. Cryptocurrency scaling up from Ethereum to Polygon. Are these good investments? I'd say Ethereum is a really solid investment, just because like it has so much, like it has like first mover advantage. Like it's here for so long. It's solidified as like the chain. I think Visa named it as like their future settlement layer and stuff. Polygon seems like a decent investment, but I think the future mostly lies with like zero knowledge proof rollups. Those seem like the end game of layer 2 scaling, which is where Ethereum's heading. So I would just keep an eye out on any like zero knowledge proof types of rollups and stuff like that.
So any other questions, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask. So let's see if we have any question from the classroom here.
Yeah. Are carbon credits limited to just the agricultural industry? Or?
Yeah, can you come here and just ask?
Hey, Tyler. So are carbon credits limited to just agricultural industry for now, or in the future, are they going to move to like other blue and white collar industries like automotive or industrial for other industries to monitor their carbon footprint?
As far as like creating carbon credits, I think that's mostly for projects that are like practicing certain methodologies. And there's a lot of different methodologies that people can implement. So one of them is like biodiversity. That's a credit that will be coming soon, which is basically like if you increase the diversity of your land, you can mint a carbon credit as long as you like provide the data and all that stuff. As far as like consuming credits, that's just up to anybody, like personal. If you want to, like, you know, if you took a flight, you want to offset your flight, you know, just buy a carbon credit, then you do something called retiring it, which is basically the same thing as like consuming it. And, you know, you get your offset and it's forever on the chain. That's kind of where I see other industries using it. As you said, like industrial types of areas, they can, you know, come to Regen Network and they can buy these credits and then retire them. And then, you know, since it's a blockchain, the tracking and all that stuff is done for free. You can just go to your address and see like, oh, I retired, you know, 2 tons of carbon, provide that data to the government or whoever. And yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? From the classroom here? Any question from, let me see, from the chat. So I have a question to ask you, Tyler, because you actually you founded this club. So what is your motivation of founding this club?
So yeah, I started off like my blockchain journey kind of doing hackathons, and I saw a lot of like other college students like looking in the Discord chats like, hey, does any other students want to team up? And I made a lot of good friends in the UCLA blockchain club, and we, you know, did a lot of hackathons together, but I wanted to bring something like that to CSUF for our own community. So yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to start that, like start a more local community and get more people into blockchain and stuff at CSUF.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. So I invited Tyler and Lloyd. It's actually for a casual hangout. So just feel free. Any question or say, can Tyler or Lloyd, can you share your own, your personal experience with crypto investment? So how did you get into this field at the first place?
Sure, I could try answering that. Mine kind of started off kind of weird. Like I was exploring like different political spectrums, and I ended up in like an anarchy Discord that was talking about donations in like Ethereum and Bitcoin. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like Ethereum kind of sounds like Ethernet. That's kind of funny. So I looked up on the internet like what Ethereum is. I saw the word smart contract and I was even more hooked. I was like, that sounds like such an odd word. So I dove into smart contracts, did the crypto zombie thing, went down that route. And then I, you know, made a Twitter account and started following like all the big names in crypto, like Vitalik, you know, people from Paradigm and A16Z. And it just seemed like so many people were talking about developments in blockchain that were happening like in real time. Like a lot of other industries, I feel like there's a lot of catch-up work to do before you can get to that point. Whereas in blockchain, like you're kind of, you can get to the bleeding edge of things really quickly, which is what kind of drew me in. So mostly just followed all those people, consumed as much information as I could, did a bunch of hackathons, and then, yeah, basically just started cold DMing people saying like, what can I do anything to help your company or your project? And that's kind of how it all got started.
Thank you, Tyler. Lloyd, are you here? So,
Yes.
so how did you get into this field? So when did you first get in touch with crypto?
The first time was around 2017, 2018, when there was a hype about Bitcoin. Everybody was just talking about it. So it was back then when I first invested, but I just invested for like a couple of weeks and just then left it. Then when lockdown happened in 2020, there was nothing to do. Basically, I had a lot of free time. So I just started exploring in that field. And it just went from there and just started following people on Twitter, reading what they post. And that's basically it.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Mhm.
So, any question or anything you want to just to talk with our speakers? The chat, classroom. Okay, then I think we are good for today. So let's thank our Tyler Goodman, thank Loai AlFarran one more time. Thank you for your wonderful talk. Then see you on Discord.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Professor.
Bye.